So, Nick, I'm super excited for the return of Sharaputdin Magomedov.
Me too.
He's going to be taking on a very tough challenger in Joilton Lutterbach. And I went back and actually watched some of Joilton's fights. He's a veteran. Look, he's got almost 50 pro MMA fights.
Wow.
He's fought in professional kickboxing, karate combat, pro boxing, you name it. This guy is a fighter. He's a true martial artist. And one of the fights I went back and watched a couple of times was him versus Dricus du Plessis, which happened, I think Dricus was about 25 or 26 when that fight took place. And a couple of things stood out to me. One, we know Shera Bullet is a dynamic striker. And don't let the fact that he's from Dagestan fool you. He actually, if you were to rank his skills, grappling would be towards the bottom end of the spectrum, and his striking would be at the top.
For sure.
And this Joilton fella is a very game striker. I mean, when he fought Dricus, he did get finished in the second round due to ground and pound, but I thought he won the first round, and he landed a lot of really significant strikes. He's a come-forward aggressive striker, so I can see why the UFC matchmakers wanted to put him against Shera Bullet, because much like Bruno Silva, he's going to engage in the striking with him. And I actually think it's going to be more easy, not to say that it's going to be a walk in the park, but his style is going to lend to a finish one way or the other, more so than Bruno Silva. He's a tough guy to get out of there. He's very game and very, very crafty. Joilton also has some really good grappling. You know, DDP is known as a high-level jiu-jitsu fighter. He got taken down and held down twice in that first round when he fought Joilton. This is some years ago now, but still Joilton showed that he's very, very skilled in the grappling department as well, which Shera did show somewhat of a vulnerability in his UFC debut as far as grappling is concerned, and in some of his other fights. So I want to get into this, break it down, ultimately make a prediction. But what do you think of the fight as a whole?
I love the fight, and I'm loving that Shera Putin's back in the mix, because when he came on and he was about to make his debut, there was a whole lot of hype around him, and it's because he looks scary. He looks like a villain in a bad movie, in a Bond movie or something like that. And I was just really intrigued by him. I wanted to see what he would go out there and do. And he looked really good against Bruno Silva. Like, Bruno Silva is a tough guy to have on your UFC debut.
Yeah.
And he went out there and he looked really good. You know, there were a couple of moments where he wound up on his back, but never in any trouble. And he was actually pretty crafty as far as striking goes from his back. So I think there's a lot of promise in Shera Putin. I think the 185 division has a new serious striker on the horizon, and it is Shera Putin. Sharaputdin Magomedov. Sorry, the names are a bit of a tongue twister.
Neither name in this video are easy.
No, wait till I get Joilton going, because but Shera Putin is one of those guys that, in my opinion, is not just a good striker. Obviously, he comes in with some really cool-looking strikes, some vicious elbows and knees up the middle.
Great kicks.
Great kicks, yeah. And that's one thing he has to watch out for when he's fighting Lutterbach, because Lutterbach was able to catch Dricus du Plessis' kicks, and I've seen it in a couple of his other fights where he'll catch the kicks and then proceed to take you down to the ground. And as you said earlier, he was able to hold Dricus down for two separate occasions in that first round that they fought. And I don't know if Shera Putin has the exact same skills on the ground to get back up to his feet like Dricus did. Dricus is also a big body for 185. So I think it's very risky for Shera Bullet to be as wild with his strikes and shot selections as he was against Bruno Silva, which means he'll clean things up a little bit. He'll be a little bit more stuck to the fundamentals and throw what he needs to throw to do the damage early on before he really starts to open up and unleash his full arsenal of attacks when it comes to standing with Joilton Lutterbach. I really like the fight, and the fact that Joilton Lutterbach, his last 3 fights aren't in MMA at all, but now he's here in the UFC. It just feels like the right kind of matchup for Shera Bullet. Obviously, people are going to say, man, we want to see this high-level striker go in there against a grappler, but you have to remember this is only his second fight in the UFC, and he has major star potential. So we need to start to not curate his career and not try to, skip out on certain people that we think will be tough matchups. But remember, he's a young guy. He's got a lot of promise. And if you put him out there, give him some good experience against veterans, other good strikers, not only are you going to get a young guy, his wrinkles and his reps inside the octagon, but you're also going to give him an opportunity to go out there and learn a little bit more about the game inside the octagon, because it's totally different. And the last thing about fighting a guy like Joilton Lutterbach that I want to touch on is he's a high-level striker as well. So you're not just going to get some, lopsided fight. Lutterbach looked really good when he was striking.
Game.
Yeah, he's very game. And while he might not be as crafty and tricky as Shera Bullet on the feet, he certainly has really powerful shots and really effective striking. So I think it's a great matchup. I think Shera Bullet will probably be the favorite. And in my opinion, early predictions goes, I have Shera Bullet winning this fight, but I don't think it'll be an easy one. I think we could see him go all 15 minutes again like we saw him in the first time in his UFC debut, because Lutterbach seems like a tough guy to get out of there. And unless you're able to go out there and just starch him with one clean shot, which I think Shera Bullet's going to sort of refrain from and be a little bit more calculated and precise with his entries and stuff, I think you're going to have to go the long way with somebody like Lutterbach. He's game, like you said, 50-plus fights. He's got a black belt thrown in there. Anybody with 50 fights and they've covered 3 or 4 different combat sports generally has a black belt under their name, and they're usually pretty solid everywhere the fight can go. So Shera's got to be very careful when he goes to the ground with this guy. But all in all, I think this is the right second matchup for Shera Bullet's UFC career, and I think it's going to be a good one. I think the crowd's going to pop whenever he comes out in Saudi Arabia. An already stacked card, but when you have a guy like this on it, it feels a little bit more special. And I'm not saying that he's going to have the rise of a Khamzat Chimaev or a Yuri Prochazka or some of these guys, but I think the rise of Shera Bullet, if he's able to get his hand raised against Lutterbach, is going to be one that is pretty impressive, and we're going to see him thrust right into some very big names very quickly.
Yeah, the UFC has shown us that they like to craft their matchmaking. You know, if it weren't for really smart matchmaking, we may never have gotten Alex Pereira. You know, I think they kind of have Shera Bullet on a similar path. They're going to, obviously, if you make it to the top of any division, you're going to run through grapplers. Yeah. It's no secret that in 2024, at the top of every division are guys that can do some really amazing things when it comes to grappling.
Right.
But there's no reason to throw him in there with a high-level wrestler in his second fight, a Bo Nickel or somebody like that. Let's let the striker do what he does, and let's let him come along as a fighter. Yeah. He's only 12-0. You know, I know there's some dispute, and they say it was fights that are not on his record. I'm going to go with what it says on SureDog. Yeah. It says he's 12-0, so I'll call him 12-0. Lutterbach is 38-10.
Wow.
And we're just talking professional MMA. His last 3 fights, which I find it to be quite interesting because he's been active, his last MMA fight was just over a year ago in April of 2023. But since then, he's had a pro boxing match and 2 professional karate combat matches, all of which he's won by finish, by knockout. So he's a very dynamic striker. He's got a lot of experience in a lot of different martial arts. There's nothing that Shera's going to throw his way that he hasn't seen before. So I think it's going to be a great, tough opponent that's going to give Shera the match that he wants. Ultimately, I'm taking Sharaputdin Magomedov to win by finish. I think he's very vicious with his kicks. He's very vicious with his elbows. His clinch game is good. He's aggressive. He's dynamic. And Joilton Lutterbach is going to give him the fight he needs to really have his coming out party.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I've got Shera Bullet, and I'm excited to do a prediction on this as the fight gets a little bit closer. But I'm really excited to see how this fight shakes out. And Lutterbach, obviously, he's one of those guys that is clearly very versed everywhere you can take an MMA fight. But I think this fight's largely going to be on the feet. I don't really see these guys going down to the ground too much. If it does happen, you'll likely see another round where they start on the feet. And then I just think as the fight progresses, you'll see less and less attempts to take this fight to the ground, and you'll see more stand-up. And I think Shera Bullet just has a little bit more speed, a little bit more pop on his shots, and ultimately is just a better, more polished striker. So that's why I see him getting his hand raised in this. I'm going to go decision early predictions. It could switch to a finish later on, but as it sits right now, Lutterbach, like you said, he's got 50 pro fights. He's always fighting, very active. And look, I don't think there's any easy fights in the UFC. I think every time you go out there, it's going to be a very difficult fight. And I know, like you said, they do kind of craft matchups the way that they want to see the fights go, or the careers go for that matter. But one thing you have to give them credit for, the guys at UFC, Mick Maynard, Hunter Campbell, Sean Shelby, whoever's making the fights, whether it's you find it lopsided, whether you find it favoritism or whatever, they put on good matchups. So I guarantee you Shera Bullet versus Lutterbach is going to be exciting from start to finish. And if Lutterbach can go up there and rise to the occasion, steal some thunder from this young guy, then more power to him. But I don't see that happening. I also don't see this being a gimme fight for Shera Bullet. I think he's going to have to dig deep to get this thing done. I think it's going to be a highly entertaining fight on a very highly entertaining card. I'm excited for it, and I can't wait to do another video on this one.
Me too, and I think, honestly, it's going to be a great fight on what is looking like it's going to shape out to be the best fight night of all time.
For sure. It belongs in the ranks of a pay-per-view, but it's not a pay-per-view. We'll go do a pay-per-view later on in the year. This fight night is absolutely insane.
It is.